Hello, this is Jed Brewer with Study Groups in the Below the Line Club. Really pleased to have you on the call today as we talk about Operation Excellence. How do we move from ordinary to extraordinary? I think if I were to ask you, you'd probably say that you would like to make more money from what you're already paying for. I know I would. And you'd also probably like to do it in a way that would be great for both your current and future customers and business that you're doing. And Operation Excellence is just that. And we're really excited to have David McClaskey lead us through Operations Excellence and how we move from ordinary to extraordinary. David is the president and founder of McClaskey Excellence Institute. He's out of Eastern Tennessee, kind of near the Knoxville, Tennessee area. And David, he's an executive coach, he's a consultant, he's a conference presenter and trainer. And he's also one of the few individuals to have the privilege of assisting 7 companies win 8 Malcolm Bridge National Quality Awards. He's been consulting for over 45 years, works with all types of organizations and businesses, including convenience stores and petroleum marketers, healthcare service, small businesses, government, etc. And really what he does is help leaders use Operations Excellence, customer service, Lean Six Sigma, and other fancy code words to improve their businesses and delight their customers more often. We've actually had a handful of our study groups who've gone to the Knoxville area and as part of their study group meetings, taken and sat through portions of David's courses, and each one of them has come back and spoken very positively about the experience. So real excited to have David on the call today. It will be very educational in nature as we all try to get better and move from ordinary to extraordinary. David's going to jump in just a second, but we want to make sure your questions can be answered as we move through the presentation. I have everybody on mute, so if you do have a question as David's talking, please type your question into the GoToWebinar dialog box. I'll be able to read that. I think David's probably going to answer several questions as he goes throughout his presentation. So I'll hold the questions and then I'll pick them up at the end with any outstanding questions for sort of an open Q&A time at the end. But please do type in those questions because we do want to make sure that they get answered at the end of the presentation. So with that introduction, David, I want to turn the floor over to you and tell us a little bit about Operations Excellence. What is it? How do you define it? And how can we move from ordinary to extraordinary?
Well, Jed, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here and talking with the Below the Line Club and the Study Groups Club and about one of my favorite topics. And I always like to start off with this question. How many of you would like to be extraordinary versus ordinary? Now, right now, we can't do two-way communication with each other very effectively, but I can tell you almost everybody I talk to would like to be extraordinary versus ordinary in their jobs. And what I know is because I've been working in this for well over 45 years with leaders of just about every kind of company, is that only about 10% of the leaders really want to run extraordinary businesses. The rest of them just want to get by. And so it's always a pleasure to talk to people, which is the great majority of the audiences I talk to, because people who want to be average can do that all by themselves. And so it's a pleasure to talk to people who want to be extraordinary. And here's some of the reasons people think, because when I'm saying 90% of the leaders don't want to be extraordinary in whatever kind of business they're running, it's not because they are first-rate leaders. They work really hard. All of them are working 50 hours a week or longer. They're smart, they're talented, but there's something holding them back. That average is what they settle for. In fact, average is the way it was developed, that's where most people are. So it is where most people, even these very talented leaders of companies, decide this is good enough. And this is one of the reasons why they settle for where they settle. And one of the questions I'll be asking you is have you settled, why have you settled where you've settled related to your operations? And what I'm going to tell you is that all of these things you see on the screen are wrong. They're just not true. Now, One of the reasons, why would you like to be extraordinary in your operations? And I bet you could name a number of reasons, but if we just sort of bottom line it is you can make more money from your current operations with less hassle. So what all this is all about is how to make more money with what you're already paying for, which happens to be the least risky way to improve your business. Everything else involves considerably more risk and money and other things. Here we're saying, whatever you're doing right now, why don't you do it at a higher level and see how much more money you can make with selling your current products and services from your current locations with your current people and your current management. And what we're going to talk about in this hour, and it's really a privilege of being able to address you for an hour. And I'm going to try to identify 3 questions and address them. What is operations excellence? What's the economic benefit of it, of operating at a level higher than you're operating now? And what's a proven path to get there? And that's what I teach regularly to leaders, is a proven path to get there, because it's not like an urban myth that this can be done. It actually can be done by anybody who really wants to do it. So with that as our agenda, if you would sort of take notes, and you might want to think of some notes as I like a note page that looks something like this. On the left side is gems. These are some key points that you might have picked up during this hour that might be useful to you. And action items, here's something I might actually do with it. So whatever framework you want to take notes, but that's one of my more favorite. So let's get right to it. Let's define operations excellence. And I'm going to define operations excellence this way. This is delivering your products, services, and environment 100% to your brand standard 100% of the time. Now, what you'll find is that the way we really make this possible, and what's holding us back, is we've made this thing about management way, way, way too complicated. It is just not that hard. But by the time we finish messing with it, it becomes almost impossible. So let's do a few simplifying assumptions. Most of us, we have parts of our business that are involved in developing new products and establishing new locations. And those are very, very legitimate functions. They're just not what we're talking about in the way of operations excellence. Here, what we're talking about is just whatever you've decided to do, whatever locations you've established, whatever products and services you've decided to use, how about delivering them to your brand standard? Now, that leads to all of the time. I will tell you, everybody delivers their brand standard most of the time. But when you start talking about all the time, you're starting to talk about a rarefied world. And let's talk about brand standards, since that can be a little bit confusing. And when I say brand standard, it's if you have a certain service, a certain product, anything that you have your name on, that you say, this is our company's, this is our service, this is our products, this is the way we this is a service we provide, this is our greetings. So this is your requirements to meet your standard. And the best way to look at that is to look at some really common consumer items. Like anything that has a company name with it first, it is a brand item. Like you might think of a Starbucks product. You think all of the Starbucks products, but an ultra caramel frappuccino blended caffeine beverage. There's requirements around that. Now, they can be adjusted by the customer, but the brand has requirements. And if they don't meet those requirements, they're not really that item. They're not meeting the brand standard. One of the companies I work with a lot is Powell's Sudden Service. They're a regional hamburger hot dog place that happens to be one of the best managed businesses in the country, and one of the Baldrige winners that I have worked with. And they have a hamburger they call the Big Pow. See, there's lots and lots of hamburgers in the world, but their brand standard hamburger is a Big Pow. Now, you could have it 400 different ways with all the variations, but every one of those has a standard to it. You could think of a McDonald's Quarter Pounder. The Quarter Pounder is a brand name for a hamburger, and that means McDonald's has specs that says if you're going to offer something that you're going to call a Quarter Pounder, a McDonald's Quarter Pounder, it has to meet these specs. But it's true not with just food products. It's true for State Farm Home Insurance, my own organization. We're going to talk about the McClaskey Triple 100 Path to Excellence. That's a branded path to excellence. It's got requirements. Now, here's sort of the trick. When you really look at most of the employees of most companies, what most of the employees of most companies are doing is they're in execution. They have been given products to the brand and the standards, and they're being asked to produce these and deliver these. So any of you, I would say 90 to 95% of all the people that work for you are basically in the business of delivering your brand standard products and services. And that's really what we're going to try to get towards 100%. So the first thing is, let's just define what we're talking about. So that's what we mean when we say operations excellence. Now, the economic benefit of it is really, it just blows your socks off. Because you're saying, well, how could it be worth that much? Well, it's actually, most people would think it's worth 5 or 10%. It's worth a whole lot more than that. Let me show you a couple examples from a couple of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award winners. And if you don't know what that is, the nation actually has an award for operations excellence and performance excellence. It's given out by the country in the name of the president. It's been given out every year for 38 years. And in all of those times, there's only been 115 winners. Only 115. These are role model examples for other people to learn from. So it's a very, very exclusive award, and it's about operations. It's about, and only 2 restaurants have ever won it, and I was fortunate to be the consultant for both of them. So let me just show you the kind of data that they have compared to regular restaurants. So Pals, it has 4 times the repeat business of their best competitor. Think of all the national brands of hamburgers. McDonald's, Burger King, they have 400% more repeat business. Well, when is the last time you heard anybody compare anything to a national brand and use the word hundreds of percents better in something that's so critical to business? Their service times are 4 times faster. A car leaves, they're a drive-through only operation. A car leaves every 18 seconds. That's 4 times faster than almost anybody else can do. But they do it with only 1 complaint for every 3,500 orders. So while they're going 4 times faster, they're over 10 times more accurate. And just think of what that does, is just blow the socks. And then let's just finish it off. They're also the benchmark in hospitality. This is what great operations looks like. And you can start seeing the economic benefit. This also helps. It's done in a way where employees want to work for the companies. This isn't a way that, well, we're going to have excellent operations and our employees are going to hate us. No, actually, we're going to do it in a way that the employees will have lower turnover. They will choose to stay with you more often because you're excellent. And in all of the time period, the last 20 years, Pals has had half the turnover of the industry. So when good times, bad times, half the turnover. I know you're interested in money, so let's talk money. They've had 38 years in a row of market share growth, 38 years in a row of same-store sales growth, and their profitability is among the best among restaurants in the nation. So we're not talking about something that has no or little economic impact. I mean, doesn't that knock your socks off? If you think of the second Baldrige winner that I've worked with a long time, and they have actually 2 brands. They have a barbecue place, Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue in Texas. I mean, look what we're talking about. We're talking about hamburgers and barbecue in Texas. These are not the most innovative products in the world, but when you do great operations, you can make a huge amount of money. Mighty Fine is another brand they developed. So they're a franchisee of Rudy's, and they are the brand owner of Mighty Fine, which is, you can think of it's like a Five Guys type of hamburger place. Look at the kind of results they got from operations. Their sales per unit, top 1% of the restaurants in the country. Guest count per square foot, top 1%. Order accuracy is the top 1%. They get 99.7% of their orders right, which means they miss orders 3 out of 1,000 times. I mean, that is just blows away anybody else in the restaurant industry. The sales per square foot, when they won the Baldrige Award, one of their restaurants had the biggest revenue per square foot of any restaurant in Texas. And we figured there were over 67,000 restaurants in Texas at that time. Mighty Fine, which is their hamburger one, also outperforms almost all hamburger units in Texas. You're interested in repeat business. That's really the key to money. Almost 98% of their customers will return. They have very, very high repeat business. Their unit volume. Now, this is really just so phenomenal. When you want to talk about what's the benefit, there are franchisees of Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue. The average revenue of the 4 stores that they are the franchisee for, there's only 36 Rudy's that exist in the nation. Their average revenue is about 3 times the revenue of the average of all the other Rudy's. So that's like every one of those stores is worth 3 of everybody else's, yet they're only paying for 1. Kind of interested? And 97% of the guests say their experience there was better than their experience with the competition. Now, what I'd like you to do is just think about this question. And then I'll tell you what average answers I have is, what percent of your customers only experience the product, services, and environment that are delivered to 100% of your brand standards? So think about your products and services, what business you're in. Those products and services, and when I say environment, clean store, certain signage, well-stocked, so they're the clean bathrooms, so the environment they're going into. What percent of the customers that that you served or that went into your business in the last month saw your products, services, and environment at 100% to your brand standard? Now, if you would write that number down, so take just another 5 seconds and come up with it. I know you're estimating, that's fine. Now, I will tell you that I've been doing this with thousands of companies, and I can tell you that the numbers of here are generally, you hardly ever see anybody above 80%. You see some people as low as 10%. So there's a range, and it's whatever your company is doing, but there's huge amount of rooms to grow in this. And it's not uncommon that people will say, less than half of our customers see our brand standard product, service, and environment. And the thing that we haven't realized is how much business we lose because of that. And I'm not talking about just complaints. That's an extreme measure that really doesn't measure much of anything of the economic impact. So here's the other question I'd like you to answer. So answer it for yourself and write it down. How much more revenue could your company get if 100% of your transactions were delivered to your brand standards, products, services, and environment every time, and your customers could count on it? The customers counting on it is really what drives their behavior. You go, well, sometimes the service is friendly, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. That significantly reduces repeat business when the customer can't count on it. So what percent, and so 0% would be, I'm not getting any increase at all, and 100% would mean I'd get twice the revenue out of the existing stores. So I'm not talking about building new stores and everything. It's how much more money could you make from what you're already paying for, your existing stores with your existing products, services. How much more money could you make if you delivered your brand standard product and service and environment 100% of the time, the customer could count on it? Now, I will tell you, here's a number that I see. I've been doing this polling with thousands of companies. And basically, the numbers from 25 to 300% are the common numbers. Now, 300% is a little extreme. 25 to 90% is not an uncommon set of numbers. And I would say it averages around 40%. So people think they can get almost 50% more revenue from what they're currently doing if they delivered their brand standard product, service, and environment. So if you're looking for a way to make more money, and you're looking for a way to make more money without having to pay out a lot more money, then operations excellence might be something you consider. And this is all I teach and all I work with. And so it's a pleasure to get people who have decided the answer to that's yes. So let's talk about a path to get there. So I hope if we've made a case so far that operations excellence might be worth considering as part of your strategy to make more money, to make more money from what you're doing, and to do it in a way that's actually extremely good for your future. We're not talking about shortcutting stuff. We're talking about really becoming very reliable on what you said you were going to do in the first place. So let's talk about an overall path. And let me just tell you a few set points here, is that management is just not that hard. But because of the way we do management, we make it extremely complex. And the key point there is that we make management complex. Management at itself isn't that complex. Now, there's a certain amount of complexity, but most of what we see doesn't really have to be there. And so what we're going to talk about is a path that doesn't ask you to do more, but asks you to do less. Stop doing the things that do not add value and cause complexity. These are things that you caused. And that's really, really good news, because if you caused it, you can stop doing it. If it's something that's totally out of your control, then there isn't anything you can do about it. But there's a lot you can control about operations excellence, and because you're mostly the problem. So let's talk about what I would call, again, we're going to this brand standard, the McClaskey 11100 path to excellence. And this is a proven path, so none of this is theory. People use this, and the two examples I gave you, both use this and just knock things out of the park day after day after day. And that's what we're talking about. And what are they really doing? They're just delivering their brand standard product and service. Not most of the time, which is what almost everybody does, but all of the time. And remember, whenever I say all, I never really mean it, because all would be perfection forever. That's not possible in operations. But think about 99.9% or something of that nature. Think about almost perfect, but their goal is 100%. So let's talk about the path. The path has 4 parts. So I hope you're curious at this point. And this is what I get to teach all the time. I get to teach this down to the operations level of teach the leader. And I'm always teaching the leaders of the organization, because they have to lead their organization to do this, not an outsider. And there's 4 parts. And the 4 major parts of the McClaskey triple entry path to excellence is thinking excellence, focus excellence, people excellence, and process excellence. So I can't go through the course that I teach, Achieving World-Class Results, which is open to the public or private classes, I spend 2 days going through this in an area where people can actually start to use it. But let me give you some things that might be helpful during this hour that we have here in front of us. So let me talk a few things about this, and let's start with thinking excellence. And if we think about this as, how does this all kind of work? Is that what you're going to do tomorrow is pretty much what you did yesterday. Same problems, you're going to come up with the same conclusions. And so if you're going to actually operate at a level better than you operated yesterday, you've got to think things differently. And that's one of the first things we work on is thinking things differently. And this excellence is not that hard, but it's only possible if you're thinking differently than you were thinking today. And one of the recipes we're going to have here is operations basically requires most of the things you're doing that you have to do. I would say 85% of all the things you're doing, you have to do to stay in business. I mean, if you don't order stuff, you can't sell stuff. If your stores aren't open, or you have some way to get your products and services to your customer, you have no way to get business. You've got to collect money. So I tell people, here's business basics 101 in 30 seconds or less. Ready for this? Here it is. Here's business. Customer has a need. You fill the need. The customer pays you money. Now, 85% of probably everything you do in the operations is designed to get that process to work. And it's absolutely essential. You can't shortcut that process. You've got to do that. But the other 15%, the way we're doing it, is what's keeping us from excellence, and is what we can adjust to make things right. And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about modifying that 15%. So mostly you're going to be doing a lot of things you're doing, but you're going to be doing it a little differently in a way that's more effective. And one of the ways when you start talking about thinking differently, Vince Lombardi did such a great example. And some people are familiar with Vince Lombardi, some people aren't. It is who the Super Bowl trophy's named after. Vince Lombardi, the Packers 49ers, the legendary coach who led them to a lot of championships. And he took a team that wasn't doing very well, and he turned it into a championship team. Well, you're not going to do that thinking like all the other coaches think. So this was a quote from him, and a belief of his, is that perfection is not attainable, which is true. But if we chase perfection, if we set that as our target, if that's what we're really after, we can catch excellence. So let me uncode this into a wonderful way to do this in business. And here's the picture I would show you. Most leaders, if you look at the bottom picture, this is how they're thinking, this is what they do. They go, well, I can't really target every because that's impossible. So the best I can really ever hope for is most. And so that's what I'm going to target. If I get it, if the customers, for example, do you serve all your customers, are all your customers greeted with a very friendly tone? Most people would say, no, not all, not everyone, but most. And that's what I mean by most. That's the international standard of ordinary. And when you've settled for most, that's the best you're ever going to get. So this is the thinking mistake that almost all organizations have done. They've said, well, the most is the best I can get. And I'll tell you what's really wrong with most in a moment. But let me go to what happens if you shoot for 100%, which is not achievable, 100% of the time. But if you target it, you get excellence. So all of a sudden, your operations are the ones people are talking about. They're the ones people are flocking to. Why? Because you delivered your brand standard product and service every time without fail, and they can count on it. That's worth a lot of money to customers, but all you're really doing is delivering what you said you were in the first time. Now, let me tell you the really, really bad side. Now, remember the really, really bad side of most, which is almost where everybody is in just about every standard that businesses have. When you as a leader say it's okay to get it right most of the time, when I say right, I mean to your brand standard for your product, services, and environment. Okay, the bathroom's not quite clean, but it's clean most of the time, or it's mostly clean. The service wasn't quite right, but it's right most of the time, or it's mostly right. The product shelves weren't quite stocked right, but it's stocked right most of the time. That's where we sort of come out. The gas pumps are working properly most of the time. Is that when you accept most, then what you have also done is authorized some. Because most plus some equals 100%. So when you say it's okay to get it mostly right, you are also saying with your authority of management and leadership, it's okay to get it wrong some of the time. And that is what Operations Excellence is going to address. We're going to attack that some so that basically it's like, no, I want it right all the time. Let's start getting processes that will do it. But processes will never do it unless you as the leader set that as a standard. But then you have to have a way of doing it, and that's what we teach. So remember when I say 100%, I'm always thinking of 99 point something, even though we're targeting 100%. So that's this thinking differently. Think about every rather than most. Huge thinker differentiator. And when you start thinking that way, the world looks different. And the next step is about focus, and I can't go through all the parts of focus, but let me talk about one that could help you understand it. What I'd like you to do, and if you would, I hope you have a sheet of paper out or your computer or something. And what I'd like you to do in the next minute, now I'm going to pause for a minute. What I'd like you to do in the next minute is I would like you to describe, you're talking to a new manager of your operation. So an operations manager, and you're saying your job is, so this is a person that might head up a convenience store or head up a fuel services operation. This is a person that is heading up one of your operations. And would you take 1 minute and describe the words that you use to describe what their job is? And I'm trying to think if this chat feature really works. If somebody types something in, I don't know if you're able to see the chat feature or not. Let's see here. Let me just see something.
Yeah, I think people should be able to type into the chat feature.
Okay.
And send it to the entire audience, and the entire audience will be able to read it.
Let's see. It says send questions to staff. Okay, let's I don't know if it's open to everybody, but if there's some way to do it, it would be fantastic. But if not, write it on your sheet of paper. So I don't see a way to open it up, but if somebody's able to do it, fine. But if not, write it on your sheet of paper. So let's take 45 more seconds and do that. These are words you use to describe. This is you're an operations leader for our company. This is your job. And I'll tell you, you know, things will sound like develop people, make sure customers are served. You know, I don't know what you're using, but it kind of sounds sort of like that in most cases.
Yeah, some of the ones that have come in, safe operations, friendly staffing, manage people, clean stores, efficiency.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Keep them coming. That's exactly what we're after. And Ted, if you read them off as you see them come in, this would be terrific.
Yeah, go ahead and send them over. Solve problems is another. Firefighter. Communicator. Motivator.
Okay.
Safety.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you would, Ted, would you read about the last 6 or 7 of them? Just read them real quick so everybody can kind of think about them all. And I'm going to ask you to listen to the 6 that are being named. So just if you would read about 6 or 7 of them off.
Yep. Problem solver, firefighter, motivator, safety, communicator, coach, accountability, professionalism.
Okay. Now, I would like everybody to rate on a 1 to 10 scale. How gray is that list of terms that you just heard? Where 10 is extremely gray, like really vague, and 1 is crystal clear. So think about a gray scale. Those words you just heard on a gray scale of 1 to 10. So 10 is they're extremely gray. People would interpret them many, many different ways. And 1 is they're crystal clear. Everybody would interpret them exactly the same way. Everybody got their number down? If you would type in your number and send it in the chat feature, and Ted, if you'll read them out, let's just kind of hear what kind of readings people are having.
10, 7, 5, 5, 7, 6.
Keep going.
5.
5, okay. If you haven't put yours in, type it in so Jed can see it. 10 is extremely vague. 1 is crystal clear. 8.
8, 8, 6. Yes, it seemed to be ranging from that 5 to 8.
Okay. All right. Let me just mention this is how we design gray into the system, which is one of the things we do that causes a huge amount of problems. And I say we, I mean the leaders of the company. So I'll show you how we turn that into black and white, because grayness is a really bad. You can't manage gray in operations. Gray causes you a whole bunch of trouble, and you created it. So I'm going to show you how some of the world's best operators define the job of their operations leader in black and white. Are you ready for this? Okay, here it is. Their job is to deliver the products and service environments 100% to the brand standard every time. Period. Because isn't that the job of operations? Operations was not there to create the products and services. They're there to deliver them. They're not there to create the environmental standards. They're there to deliver them. That's what we're paying operations people for. So I know you could walk into your facility, and within a minute or less, you can tell whether things are operating to your brand standard, product, services, and environment right now. Almost everybody, if they get anywhere near their own operation, They can tell. So this is something that's very, very measured. This is something you can measure right now. In fact, I would encourage you, if you just want to kind of, let's just see, walk into any of your operations, sometime today or tomorrow, and just see what percent of the product, service, and environment am I seeing right now to 100% of the brand standard. Then the brand standard is your brand standard. It isn't like this generic brand standard. It's your brand. Just like Starbucks isn't a generic coffee, it's a Starbucks coffee. It's a brand. So you'll find that when we don't understand what we were really there for, we tend to do all sorts of confusing things. We tend to rate people all over the map because we've never really defined their job in anything but gray. We tend to be overly critical because we never really understood what was good and bad. And so lots and lots of bad things start to happen. And you can see this is part of what we do with focus. And hopefully this is a demonstration of something you could do. Now, if you don't like this definition, pick one that you like. But I can tell you this really works really well and is really the essence of what operations is there for. If we start talking about people excellence, we've really confused a lot of things as to why we even have people. I will ask, and I could ask you if we might have a minute to do this. If you were to type into the chat feature, why do you hire people? What would you say? So just type into the chat feature as fast as you can. And Jed, if you could read a few off, because I can't see the chat feature, but Jed can. So just to kind of see, we hire people to do what?
To serve the customers' end needs, to care for customers so we have business, to deliver products and services, to think and get stuff done. Those are the ones I have in.
Can you see how vague all that is? There's a very, very precise definition of what people really do. And when you have vagueness, you manage that way and you just confuse things, make things even worse. So you'll find the first thing to do is to be really, really crystal clear as to why you hire people in the first place. And I'll just go ahead and tell you the answer. You hire people to precisely follow the process that you give them every time, even if you're not in the building, because they want to. That's why you hire people. If you could do the process without people, you wouldn't have hired them. But you don't want people just doing anything, because you can't get your brand standard by everybody deciding this is my hamburger. No, well, actually, you're not producing your hamburger. You're producing the brand's hamburger. Or you're not giving your service, what you think is good service. You're giving the brand service. You're not cleaning the store or the area to your standards. You're cleaning it to the brand standards. So the idea is that with that, all of a sudden things get to be very, very precise. So let's talk about people excellence. We set everyone up for 100% success. To take things really, really easy and really simple, 100% success is so vague, you could drive a truck to it. So I'm just going to make it black and white. Success means to precisely follow the steps of the process every time without fail, even if the supervisor isn't in the building. That's what we set people up for. Now, I will tell you, I've talked to dozens and dozens, thousands of leaders, and almost nobody is setting their people up to do this every time. They're setting them up to do it sort of right most of the time. And the loss of money that you're losing because of that standard is huge. And that's what we're really talking about. Now, one of the key things you have to do is eliminate gray. You created all this gray. You created all this vagueness. You just design it out. We teach people how to design gray out of their business, how to set everyone up for 100% success, which is very possible to do with your existing workforce and with your existing pay structure. So you have to think of the world of operations excellence, gray is your enemy. You've got to design it out. And that's what we'd be talking about, how to design it out. Just to give you one of the things we talk about under people excellence is the full use of time and talent. It's very important to fully use people's time and talent towards your mission. And what you find with just about every job that there is in operations is that sometimes people are really, really busy, and sometimes the job's not there because there's nobody in the store, or if you're in a food business, there's nobody ordering right now. So basically, we teach people to have secondary jobs for everybody. So when your main job is not there, which almost always is for operations, some of the time their main job isn't there, automatically switch to secondary jobs so that you don't, because, would you like a secret? I'll tell you. Here's how you can judge how well you're doing on this. All you have to do is walk in your store or watch your security cameras and see people standing around doing nothing. You can walk into your office and watch it sometimes, but it's much easier to do in operations where a lot of work also involves movement. So when you see that, you are not only losing productivity, you're disrespecting people. This really hurts your operations. And we teach people how not to do that. So, but to tell you is the standard for extraordinary is the full use of their time and talents. So every second you're on the clock, you'll be doing the most productive thing you can do from your position towards our mission. We set that up. That is respecting people. So we train for the main job to get it 100% right, which is precisely follow the process. And we train what to do when the main job's not there, and we train them to automatically switch to it. So that's just a sample of some of the wonderful, wonderful stuff we have under People Excellence. I hope you're finding these solutions very pragmatic and doable. They're proven solutions that people work. Let's just talk about the last things as we're running close to our time at this point. Process excellence. And process excellence, processes, some people like processes, some people hate them, but processes are absolutely essential. They are the path to get things done. All of your genius, all of your thoughts that you have in your brain, you capture in your processes. This is how you do our products and services and get our environment to brand standard. And processes are the steps we follow to get from the inputs to outputs. And the steps are what we train people to do. See how all of a sudden life is getting a lot simpler? This is not such a vague thing. This is not such impossible stuff to do once we start focusing on what it is. And so we design processes to 100% achieve the process requirements that process is supposed to do, whether it's your service process for your customers, or whether it's your stocking process, or whether it's your ordering process, or whether it's your clean the bathroom process, whatever it is, it's got standards that have to be met to meet your brand standards. Then we then turn those into steps. We then standardize them to all locations. There's no sense in having different ways. I can tell you one of the great leaders in convenience stores, I won't name who it is, said, you know what my wish is? I wish I could go to 3 of my stores, order a hot dog, and get the same tasting hot dog in all 3 stores. That's what happens when you're not operationally excellent. That you get in, haven't standardized all your processes into all your locations. Your products and services and environment vary. And then you systematically improve it. So we teach about how to do those things. So we've briefly gone through the path that we want to go. And if you're interested in learning more, McClaskey Excellence Institute would be the place to go. We can absolutely help them do it either in private or public classes. You go to our website, McClaskeyExcellence.com. You would see our classes. We are all now web-based classes. So we're web-based live instructor. Because of the situation right now, we are not doing live classes, but we are doing web classes, and they're going over extremely well. So we can hit time, place, and that type of thing. And what we do is we teach classes on operations excellence. We consult on it. We do executive coaching, which I do a lot of it with leaders. And then at conferences, we talk, only these would now be virtual talks. So with that, and if you went to our website, you would see that we have 3 or 4 classes. The main one is a 2-day Achieving World-Class Results class. It teaches this path I talked about. Lean, we want to get rid of all types of waste. Every bit of waste we can get rid of, that's lean, because this course is designed for service. And so it's extremely good for that. Spectacular customer service. How do you really, it's one of the few ways you can get a lot more money and not have to pay anymore, by having spectacular customer service that doesn't slow your service time. And those are just some of the things we do. And with that, Jed, could we open it up for questions for the last 15 minutes we have?
Yeah, absolutely. Please type in any questions that you have, and I'll relay them to David. I have a handful that have come in already, David. Um, how can we figure out what our brand standard is or should be? You've
Uh,
put a lot of emphasis around let's deliver our brand standard 100% of the time, but how do we figure out what that is?
well, first of all, that is a brilliant question because in the basis of it, it says we haven't really defined our brand standard well. And since that's really the heart of your operation and what you're making your money on, and it causes all sorts of variations. So first of all, recognizing, and I will tell you, most organizations have not precisely described their brand standard. And what you have to do is, it's I would say, just practice with one thing. And one thing is, if you have a service where you greet customers, so whatever your business is, this is the person that greets the customer, either on the phone or in person. What is the standards for that greeting? That's actually your brand standard. It might say, oh, I need to serve them within a minute or within 10 seconds or whatever. I need to, and I need to give a friendly greeting. And then, okay, what is our standard for a friendly greeting? I need to be able to answer questions within a minute. Some people have standards like, I want the person who the customer first talks to be able to answer their question. Now, none of those are musts, but that's what brand standards sound like. And the first thing we do, and this is one of the things we do with executive coaching a lot, is we say, okay, let's just go through that. This is not that hard. You actually already know the answer to that. And I'll tell you how I know. Is because when you walk into your store, you know when things aren't right. And the only reason they're not right is because they're not meeting your brand standard. So, but the trouble is, and I'll tell you the problem is, I worked with one convenience store that had 92 restaurants. And was talking to one of the restaurant managers. And they had 2 or 3 different regional supervisors. And he said, just thinking about restroom standards, so just the cleanliness of restrooms. He said, one of those supervisors think I have super clean restrooms. Another one thinks my restrooms are just absolutely filthy dirty. And the other one never comments on restrooms. And what that says is that very, very different brand standards. One of them says the uniform that I'm wearing and my uniform of employees is just right. Another one says it's just terrible. But they can't tell me what it is. All they can do is tell me they don't like it. So that's what lack of brand standards gets you. And all you really have to do, and I would just practice with one thing. Pick a product, a service, or an environmental condition and say, what are the standards? And here's the trick. We're going to have 3 people look at those standards because they have to be black and white. And all 3 of them would look at a restroom or a customer service or a product, whatever it is that you wrote that standard on. And they would all agree as if the current situation is meeting the standard or is not, there would be no split decisions. Because if there are split decisions, it says the standard's gray. So we not only need the standard, we need it in black and white. So multiple people who are knowledgeable of the standard can look at the environment or the service or the product, and all of them would come to the exact same answer. This met our standard or it did not. And that's how we start. So it's actually, that would be my suggestion. Start with any one thing because you already know the answer. The trouble is everybody that works for you knows the answer. And so you need to get an answer that the brand has said, this is our brand's answer. This is how much chili you put on a hot dog. This is how you greet our customers. This is what clean means for our floor.
Thanks, David. You also mentioned, you put a lot of emphasis on following processes or procedures that you've set up and doing it all the time. How do we balance kind of the robotic following procedures with creativity and innovation?
I find that that's very, very interesting. And I have these discussions a lot, is that even the way this question's framed, it has a mindset that is incorrect. It sounds like one is opposite of the other. They're actually both on the same side of the fence. Because let's say you innovate a new service or a new product or a new way to do something. If you can't put it in a process that this is better. So I innovate something, this is better. This is going to make our product or service better. And well, how do you get anybody else to do it? Well, you put it in a process. Well, if people ignore your processes, it doesn't matter whether you innovated a good way or not. They're not going to do it anyway. But if you decided this was better and put it in your process and have the protocol that you will follow the process, the approved process, now the innovation has become part of your brand. So what you will find is innovation without process adherence is worthless. How are you going to get it in operations if nobody's going to follow it anyway? Now, if you can do things that people can't reverse and can't control, like I've got a new kind of equipment or a new type of cooler or something like that people can't change, okay. But if it's reversible, you've got to really have adherence to a process. So what you find is that innovation has almost no pragmatic value if it's not followed in an environment that also has strict discipline to their processes. And the people that make a lot of money are ones that are both innovate things and have strict discipline. Unfortunately, managers tend to be biased towards one or the other. I'm biased towards being loosey-goosey, or I'm biased towards follow the rules, period, even though the rules are very gray. Those are both very bad positions. So what you find is that, so what we say is, so I'll tell you how we solve it. We tell people they have a better way of doing things, don't try it. Tell us about it. Let us do a pilot of it. Let's see if it's really better than our current process. If it's better and goes through our approval process, we will change our process. We will train people in the change process, and everybody will be required to follow the new steps. Now, all boats have risen in the ocean. So anybody that's thinking that innovation and discipline to following processes are different, this is really faulty thinking.
Thank you. And you were starting to go there. What are best practices for developing processes? You gave an example of innovative process or new process of sending it through a testing mechanism, but just processes in general. What are best practices for developing them?
And best practices are, you want to have black and white steps that everybody who's assigned to that job can follow. And if you follow the steps, if a trained person, so in other words, first of all, you have to define what makes 100% of a process. If a trained person follows the steps, they will get the brand standard of whatever that process was supposed to be delivering every time. And when a trained person follows the steps and doesn't get the brand standard every time, there's something wrong with the process. And so you work on the processes until somebody follows that steps, a person who's been trained in the process. So it's not something you could give to a person in the street and they would just know it. But a person who's been trained on the process, they follow those steps. And what I like to do is give GPS as an example. You go, well, is GPS a good process? Well, you first put in the brand standard, which is like where you want to go. And it gives you some adjustments. Maybe you want to go there using the shortest route or the shortest time or mostly interstates. And then it gives you the steps. And if you follow those steps, you get to your destination. And that is what we want processes to do. So processes aren't that hard to write. This is one of those things where we've made them terribly confusing. But you have to put in the steps and the detail that, if followed, will result in the brand standard product and service being produced every time.
Got it. And another question that is sort of around employee morale. With excellence, you're setting a very high bar, and obviously we never, as you mentioned, it's 99-point-something% of 100, and we want to get close to 100. But when we do fall short, how do we maintain, employee morale when excellence is our standard?
These are such wonderful questions. I'm so glad. I mean, the people in study groups are just such a wonderful group of learners, and that's why it's so wonderful to be around people that are in study groups and leaders. It is that basically you're talking about coaching. So when you observe somebody do it right, you want to make sure you tell them that, yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for the way you did that job. You did that during the rush, just great. And so positive. And when you see there's a gap, you need to coach them and say, that's right, but you didn't follow this step right. This part's not right. Now, what we think about, and this is a mindset. If you think people are leaving you because you're telling them they're not doing the job right, I think you're under some sort of imagination. How about the fact that you weren't very clear about what their job was supposed to do? You didn't train them to do it 100% right, which means you set them up to fail X% of the time because you never intended them to get it right all the time anyway. And people get tired of being set up to fail. But when they know what they're doing is setting up to succeed, people actually stay with you. And they know when you're giving them feedback, coaching feedback, that look, no, that step wasn't done right, that you're doing that to help them. And what I'd like to take the environment is to the sports world. All the great football teams have coaches. Here you have the greatest pro football teams in the world, and they got people that are telling them how to do it better. Do you think they walk off the field mad because somebody told me how to do my job a little bit better? Not if I'm trying to be the best. And so what you find is creating an environment where coaching isn't punitive. It is to help you be the best you can be. And that's why I'm going to give you very specific feedback. This is what you didn't do right in this step. And what you find when it's done in a respectful manner and done right away and done to help you be the best you can be, and of course, we're only letting you follow the process our way, not your way, people actually stay. You'll find that almost everybody that has excellent operations also has lower turnover than most people. People like working in an environment where they're set up for success, not set up to fail.
Well, David, we're running at the end of our time here. I really appreciate you just sharing your learnings over 45 years of working with firms like ours. For the audience members, thank you for your questions. If there were questions for David that you have that we haven't yet answered, feel free to reach out to David. I know he'd be happy to visit with you or respond by an email. And also encourage you to check out the McClaskey Institute as well. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we've had a handful of study group members or study groups and members who've gone through some of David's classes, and everybody I've heard from has raved about it. We have a short eval as you close out the webinar. We'd encourage you to fill that out with what you thought of David's presentation. Appreciate any feedback you have so we can continue to keep these webinars of high value to you. Stay safe and healthy, and enjoy the summer. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.